All right. Welcome to Community Conversations Ending Cash Bail in Virginia. I'm Stephanie Richmond. I'm an associate professor of history at Norfolk State University and director of the Joseph Jenkins Roberts Center for the Study of the African Diaspora. We have with us today two individuals from the Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund and formerly from Humanities Behind Bars, who are going to talk to us about ending cash bail in Virginia and why this is such an important activist movement. I am recording this webinar for archival purposes, and so by participating in the event, you consent to the recording. We have a couple of rules for participation. Please be respectful, be mindful, and be professional. You are more than welcome to use the Q&A tab to ask questions of the panelists throughout the webinar. If you have a particular question for either of our panelists, please make sure you put their name in the comment. Please try and keep your questions and comments short and on topic. And we do not allow profanity or inappropriate comments. If you are uncivil or engage in inappropriate behavior, you will be immediately removed from the webinar. We cannot help with technical issues of attendees during the webinar. If you are having issues, please exit the webinar, close your browser or Zoom completely, and then log back in. Thank you. We will finish promptly by 1:30, as I know students have to get to 1:30 classes. And now I'm going to turn this over to Shane Sudgen and Deanna Smith from the Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund.
Thank you. It's good to be here and to be able to talk with everyone, or at least present research about cash bail in Virginia. And like Dr. Richmond said, why it's important that we organize against it. I am seeing a black screen. I don't know if anyone else is. I cannot see the presentation. Okay. Thank you. So we are from the Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund. I'm Deanna, by the way. I'm one of the organizers with the Bail Fund, and I'm also co-director of Humanities Behind Bars, which is a nonprofit that works with incarcerated folks and people on the outside, just building networks of care and really showing care to those who are affected by the prison industrial complex. So just a little bit about the bail fund. It is an abolitionist community bail fund, meaning there's no real structure or hierarchy to it. It's just a bunch of organizers who are coming together, obviously, to get people out of jail who are in there simply because they cannot afford cash bail. We do operate all across the 7 cities, as you can see, including Williamsburg. We do have a map in the presentation as well to show where we've been. So that's my introduction. I'm going to go ahead and let Shane do his introduction. He's done tons of research on cash bail in general and then cash bail in Virginia. So this is kind of his presentation to present all of the good information that he's gathered. And I'm just here to provide some support and to talk about larger grassroots movements and kind of the ideas around how we operate.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Deanna. My name is Shane Sugden. I'm a senior in high school at the Virginia Beach Legal Studies Academy at First Colonial High School. And as Deanna mentioned, as part of my senior project, I'm taking on why cash bail is unjust and what we can do about it. And just to take you through a little bit of my background, my father is a forensic psychologist, and growing up, he used to tell me about the various stories of the people he had court-ordered evaluations for. And he used to tell me that there were people that he saw in jail, for, let's say, stealing a pack of chips or trespassing or panhandling. And these people were simply in jail because they could not afford bail. And most of these bails are set at $500, $1,000. And the real reason why people are in pretrial detention is because of the money difference. And so I took this passion. I applied to the Legal Studies Academy in high school, and I further researched cash bail and the justice system. And then my sophomore year of high school, through a family friend, I heard about Humanities Behind Bars. And with them, we helped come together and we created the Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund to then bail people out of jail for various charges. And yep, right now I'm presenting this project and going over some of the research I found in my paper. So this man right here is Khalif Browder. Khalif Browder was a 16-year-old kid in New York City and was charged for allegedly stealing a backpack. And Khalif Browder was charged, arrested, brought to the police station where he was given a bail amount of $3,000. Khalif Browder's family was unable to pay this bail, and therefore Khalif Browder was sent to pretrial detention and had to serve time before his trial began. And in most cases, pretrial detention lasts around 6 months or so. But in Khalif Browder's case, he spent 3 years in Rikers Island's jail in New York City. Throughout these 3 years, he suffered many abuses from other guards, other people in the jail, and was sent to solitary confinement countless times throughout his 3 years. All of this because he could not afford a $3,000 bail for his charge. And after the 3 years were over, he finally got to his trial, and the judge ruled that the case was dismissed. So the 3 years of hardships, trauma, abuse was all for nothing, as the case was dismissed and he was exonerated. And because of the hardship, the trauma, and the experience that Khalif Browder faced, he ended up taking his own life just 2 years after. And this story really fueled my passion for bail and made sure that the 646,000 people like Khalif Browder sitting in United States pretrial detention centers to date would not have to experience the same problem.
So this is a little bit about Humanities Behind Bars, which is not it's the organization that assisted in kind of creating an iteration of the bail fund in 2016, 2017, around that time. So the bail fund is not a new thing in Hampton Roads. But as we all know, it was pretty much fueled by the protests going on in 2020. And after that, it was just a flood of donations. So we decided, Humanities Behind Bars decided that it should be a community bail fund, which is run by community organizers and volunteers, or anyone who wants to join in bailing people out and providing support, after bail. So it's now kind of officially called Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund. We use the acronym TSBF just to kind of make it easier to say. Instead of saying, Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund is kind of a tongue twister for me when I'm talking really fast. So I probably will refer to it as TSBF, just as a heads up. But Humanities Behind Bars is a grassroots collective of teachers, students, organizers, and artists committed to the abolition of jails and prisons, educating the community about the prison industrial complex and state-sanctioned violence, and dreaming up new ways of living. We are kind of nationally known in the sense that we have a pen pal program for people all over the United States who are incarcerated and want pen pals. We have a sister chapter in California at the University of California, Santa Barbara, I believe. We have a sister chapter out there. So it's really just a network of folks who are committed to the abolition of prisons and jails. So to date, since 2020, when the Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund kind of really was fueled by community members. We've bailed out 104 people, paying $253,835 in cash bail. The bail fund is a revolving fund, meaning that anything that we pay out in bail, once the case has been resolved or the person goes to court, that money is returned to us. So then we can bail out more people. So that's just kind of for transparency purposes. We like to let people know, what we're doing as the bail fund. And as I said earlier, we were going to have a map. So these are the jails that we've posted bail at so far. More so across the water, like Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Portsmouth was kind of where we were concentrated in the beginning. And then as news spread and we, really pushed that the bail fund was available for anyone, we've started to be more on the peninsula, which I'm happy about. I reside in Newport News, so I'm really glad to actually have folks that I can help out on this side as well.
And as Deanna mentioned, we post bail in these 7 cities across the 757. And people always wonder, well, how do we get in touch with these people that need our help? And so we started off in 2020 by reaching out to public defenders across the 7 cities and making an informational brochure that was then distributed throughout the jails. And from that informational brochure, people could see how to contact us, how to get in touch, and what we do exactly and how we can help their case and ultimately bail them out of jail. And from then, the message is spread. Now word of mouth is a very useful form of communication of the bail fund. And we were recently just added to the National Bail Fund Network for accredited bail funds across the United States. So now family and friends that have a loved one in jail and pretrial detention can then look us up on the internet and from the Bail Fund Network and find our bail fund and figure out how to contact us through our bail phone or our email and other sources of communication. So what is cash bail? Cash bail is pretty much, it starts off, someone is arrested, they are charged for a crime, and then they are brought to the magistrate's office where they will have their bail hearing. And in this process, the magistrate will either give the person, no bail at all, they will give them bail at a certain price, or they will release them with no money involved. And for 72% of the cases, money isn't involved in the bail. And as you can see from this graph, 34% of those people where money is involved cannot afford this amount and are therefore detained pre-trial. And in Virginia alone, Virginia is one of the 40 states in the United States that does not provide a public defender in the initial bail hearing. So it is just the person that is charged, a guard, and the magistrate officer that are then determining the bail based on various pretrial risk assessments and other outdated and flawed data. So how is cash bail a cycle of exploitation? Well, as I mentioned previously, the magistrate can offer bail, and the bail bondsman, in order to pay this bail, let's say the bail is $5,000. The person can either pay the bail in full for $5,000, and if they attend their court case, they'll get the money back. And if they cannot afford the $5,000, they can pay a 10% non-refundable fee to a bail bondsman, which is $500 in that case. And the problem with this is $500 is very unreasonable for a majority of people that are in pretrial detention. And in order to make this $500 up, people must sell assets, ask for loans, ask for help from neighbors, family, and friends. And it ends up creating this cycle where they're unable to pay back the money that the 10% fee, and bail bondsmen will further seize assets and exploit the financial ruin of this person. Additionally, after bail is posted, most trials take around 6 months or more to actually begin from the date of the initial arrest and the setting of the bail. And throughout these 6 months, the person is in pretrial detention and is suffering numerous effects I will touch on later, and is out of employment for 6 months or more, away from their family, and is experiencing extreme hardship while legally presumed innocent. And finally, another major problem with cash bail and is court appearance. We have had many cases where we've had someone that we're helping charged with one crime in one jurisdiction and then another crime in another jurisdiction. And this person may be incarcerated in that one jurisdiction where they have a trial in another one, and they are physically unable to attend their court case in the other jurisdiction, which leads to a failure to appear. And a failure to appear exacerbates this problem because now if they ever are charged with the crime again, they will likely not receive bail. And if they do, it will be at a really, really high amount. And now they have another charge on their record. And then Deanna's going to touch on surveillance.
So a lot of times, folks who we have bailed out or they've come to us to request we help a family member or a friend. Some condition, most of the times, conditions are put on their release. Sometimes we see they can't leave the state of Virginia, obviously, or they have to reside with a certain person or away from a certain person. Most of the time, some of the folks that we've helped had to have ankle monitors, which are expensive and you don't get that money back. So the bail fund has assisted a few people with ankle monitors doing that purchase just so they can get out. So even with being bailed out and not being in jail, you're still trapped in the cycle of now you're being monitored and you can't move freely, obviously, with this presumption of innocence. So that's where surveillance comes into this cycle of exploitation. You kind of have no free movement, no space. You are reduced to the state knowing your every move, and you haven't even had your day in court yet. So that's a big thing. So cash bail obviously harms our Black, Brown, and queer communities. Virginia's national incarceration rate, Virginia's incarceration rate is 749 per 100,000 people. And the national overall in the United States is 649 per 100,000 people. So you can see Virginia incarcerates folks at a way higher rate than the national incarceration rate. And this most of the time is due, all of the time, this is due to discriminatory practices, like Shane mentioned, such as pretrial risk assessments, which is literally just inputting different demographics and different numbers, and then having a computer tell you whether a person deserves to have their freedom or not. And really important to kind of our thinking around this is prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear human beings. And obviously we can apply that to jails as well. So homelessness, low income, those are really, really, really high reasons why someone is incarcerated or put in pretrial detention in the first place. So we really want to let the community know the fact that someone is in pretrial detention. They most likely did not do anything wrong other than be the wrong color, the wrong sexual orientation, or just without housing or low income.
I'd like to also add on the pretrial risk assessment. Most of the time they use factors such as employment, income, family stability, past criminal history. And what I talked about earlier, failure to appears, that is now on your record for if you're charged again. So that, like I said, may cause you to be denied bail another time around or at a really high price. And the people that need bail and are having trouble affording bail, they're affected by pretrial risk assessments because pretrial risk assessments also factor in income. So the lower the income, the higher risk you are of fleeing and to society, which makes no sense. And if you're already struggling to pay bail, then they're going to increase that rate of how much the bail is going to cost for you, and it's going to be unaffordable. And also they take into consideration the region of where you're from, and most pretrial risk assessments have data from the 1990s or before, and they use different regions and areas and pretty much look at 30-year ago criminal trends and criminal history that has no prevalence to today's world.
So as you can see, this is kind of a comparison of Virginia with other states in terms of pretrial population, actual sentence population, and then the prison population. So you can see where Virginia ranks in all of this, which, you know, we can argue about a couple of different things here, but really pointing out that the pretrial population, while some of the other states you see kind of have a decrease, Virginia doesn't really decrease much at all. If anything, they continue to add and add and add to their jail and prison population. So this is important to point out in the sense that this data shows 2005 to 2015. And one of the main arguments of a couple of places who do research on, you know, mass incarceration and pretrial detention is the fact that data is so old. You know, there's no reason to do new data to show the increase because the system is working exactly how it is supposed to, meaning it disappears people. It disappears people who do not fit, you know, quote unquote, societal norms. They're not middle class or, you know, upper middle class or upper class just in general. They're not white. They're not, you know, working, or they don't have a high paying job. So the way Virginia and pretty much everybody in the United States thinks to handle those types of communities and those types of folks in those different populations is to just find a way to stick them in jail, stick them in prison, and make it really, really, really difficult to get their freedom. And then once they do, make it really, really difficult to live, essentially, because now you have the surveillance, you have the income that is or isn't coming in anymore. You have a whole family to take care of. And now you have, you know, all of these things on your record, and employers look at that and they won't hire you for certain things. So it really boils down to the effects on the people themselves of all of this. Like, they're not just numbers, the effects are real and they are far reaching on people and the community.
So cash bail targets low income communities. As Deanna previously just mentioned, the average yearly income for a man who cannot afford bail is $16,000, and for a woman, it is $11,000. So the average bail price is $10,000. So pretty much a woman that cannot afford bail is pretty much asked to pay almost 100% of her yearly income for bail. This is impossible for almost anyone in the situation, because someone who's making $11,000 a year or $16,000 a year is trying to provide basic necessities for themselves and their family. They're trying to make ends meet. And a rare incident, maybe they're walking on the street and they're accused for something that they may or may not have done. They are now put in the position where they have to come up with a $10,000 bail, or as I said earlier, a $1,000 non-refundable bail. And now they are put in a position where it is impossible to recover, and that they're most likely going to suffer in pretrial detention. And the $10,000 bail average would take the average person around 8 months to make. That is almost an entire year income devoted on bail. And most of the time, these cases are completely unexpected when someone is charged for a crime and they do not have that kind of funds or money aside ready for an incident like this. And 90% of people who are in pretrial detention are more likely to plead guilty. This is because if you are charged with, let's say, a misdemeanor, it makes more sense financially and for your family to plead guilty to this misdemeanor, because if you don't, then you're going to be sitting in trial for 6 months or more, and maybe you're dismissed, maybe it's a low charge, but regardless, if you cannot pay that, then it doesn't make any sense. And so 50% of these same cases would have been dismissed, and less than 25% would have been given jail sentences. So these same people that are pleading guilty to the various misdemeanor charges, these 50% of these cases would likely have been dismissed, and less than 25% of these would have been given jail sentences. So if people had the resources, the ability to pay bail, they could have fought these cases properly and had a reasonable effort and attempt at their trial and their innocence. But now the record is stained. They have let's say a misdemeanor offense on their record, possible fines, possible penalties, possible employment loss because they pleaded guilty when they really had no choice.
And I want to point out also, just in conversation with the bail fund, we do bail out anyone. We do not pay attention to charges. If we can afford the bail, we pay the bail. And we model ourselves off of Richmond's bail fund. So, when we were starting this or picking this back up, we had a lot of conversations with Richmond, and we, got a lot of good information and good ways to organize around cash bail in this part of Virginia. Our limit is between 5,000 and 10,000, depending on how much we have in the bail fund. So if we're low on funds, our maximum will be 5,000, but we've done a couple of $10,000 bails. And like I said, we don't pay attention to charges. Whoever we can bail out and we have the money and they reach out to us, we're going to do so. And currently we have a wait list just because of the amount of people who now know about the bail fund. So we have to take that into account too, kind of prioritizing, people of color. We prioritize those with health conditions and all of that. So that's kind of how we have to organize around the bail fund right now, just with low funds. But I just wanted to point out that we don't pay attention to charges. If we can afford it, we're bailing people out.
And just to add to that point, we're not lawyers. The magistrate decides the bail. They decide whether the person gets bailed or not. And if someone has the option to pay bail and they're sitting in pretrial detention because they don't have the money, then that's not fair. They would have been, if they had the money, they would have been out. So our belief is that if they are given the option of money to bail out their innocence, then we should be able to bail them out. And like Deanna said, we don't pay attention to the charges because that's the magistrate's job, that's the judge's job, and our job is just to provide the fair chance and the justice that the person should receive and not make an economic disparity between two defendants of the same exact charge and the same exact criminal history. So the effects of pretrial detention. A defendant or a person that has any interaction with the justice system has a 22% decrease in income. Furthermore, if you were in jail in pretrial detention, you are missing out on 6 months or more of income because you are unable to work, you are unable to provide for your family because you are in jail waiting your trial under the presumption of innocence. Furthermore, there is a high risk for health complications, especially with those with pre-existing conditions. Examples of these conditions include HIV, hepatitis C, tuberculosis, hypertension, asthma, arthritis, cervical cancer, anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. When you have a high pretrial detention capacity, such as Virginia, you have more people per doctor, more people per resource, and people are now tighter together. There's more people in the jail, way more than they're supposed to be, way more than the health codes allow there to be. And now disease, viruses, illnesses can spread very rapidly, and people are not getting the attention with surveillance that they need and deserve. And now various things can happen with guards and people in the jail, and things can go unseen and unrecorded because there are just too many people to keep track of. And furthermore, just as I was saying, with the lack of surveillance, when there are many more people in jail because of pretrial detention, there's a 33% increase in victimization within the first 3 days. So within the first 3 days of jail, this person is still legally presumed innocent. They were just given bail. They are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bail. And now they have a 1/3 chance of being victimized before their trial even begins. So in 2015, there were 8,000 cases of victimization reported directly correlated to pretrial detention. If these people were at home with their family, away from pretrial detention, preparing for their trial, these cases would not have happened. Furthermore, there's a 50% increase in divorce rates for anyone with any interaction with the justice system. This means that if you are in jail, even if you're innocent, guilty, the case is dismissed, any interaction is time where you are away from your family, you are in jail, you are in pretrial detention, and now your family cannot rely on you for financial support, they cannot rely on you for emotional support, and you're away from your family, which further leads to a 23% increase in expulsion for children with a parent that is incarcerated or in pretrial detention, which means, like I've said before, the different emotional disconnect, the financial disconnect. Now the two people at home or the family at home are now having to figure out how to provide for themselves and their family without their significant loved one while they are in pretrial incarceration. And lastly, there's an 11.7% recidivism rate for anyone with any interaction with the justice system. The case could be dismissed, but there's an 11.7% chance this person returns to jail, returns to court for another charge. And furthermore, there's a completely inaccurate bias of judges that if you are in jail in pretrial detention, that you are guilty. People think that you're in jail, since they don't know that the bail history, that if you're in jail, that you're likely a risk to society or a likely to flight, or you have a significant charge, and that's why you're in jail. When really, as we talked about earlier, it could be because of the money, flood, pretrial risk assessments, and other various effects.
And obviously with, COVID going on, there's a lot of higher risk with people in jails. We've organized around a few people who are incarcerated in Chesapeake that are having, issues with the spread of COVID. So we do talk to people and their family members, and we do as much as we can in terms of agitating, the system to do basic human needs, like providing protections, against communicable diseases in jails. But as you can see, this slide talks about cash bail being a community issue, meaning that, as Shane talks about, and as we have hopefully pointed out to everyone, that Virginia's pretrial detention rate exceeds the national average. And then the average jail population is 100 to 150% over capacity, meaning that, they pack more and more and more people inside of an already overcrowded jail, like I said, just to disappear them. And this leads to the building of more prisons, and this leads to, contracting out space. So now you have private prisons, which make a disgusting amount of money off of incarcerating people and holding them in pretrial detention. And as you can see also, Virginia is not one to provide a public defender, as Shane pointed out in the first appearance. So people are standing in front of magistrates and other judicial officers without representation. They just kind of have to stand there and take what this person gives them. And it all depends on how the person feels. They're not required to, give someone a bail. That goes back to the pretrial risk assessment, that contributes, as well as just human bias. So yeah, go ahead, Shane. No, go ahead, Shane.
And the last point, that Virginia's current jail population has a 5% pretrial detention rate. As Deanna mentioned, that Virginia is one of the leading states in the entire country for pretrial detention. And this costs the state $1.5 billion annually. Just for a moment, think about all of the resources, all the different ways we could spend $1.5 billion. I mean, we could end pretrial detention. We could provide jail doctors. We could provide more therapeutic services. We could provide reentry programs. We could provide so many more community programs to benefit people instead of bring them back to jail. But instead, the $1.5 billion is being used to put people in pretrial detention that are under the presumption of innocence. So the end goal of the bail fund and cash bail. So the Eighth Amendment, cash bail is a direct violation of the Eighth Amendment. According to Stack v. Boyle's U.S. Supreme Court case, bail should be determined on a case-by-case basis based on the person's financial need and ability to pay bail. How is it fair if there's one person, or if there's two people, they are charged with the same exact crime, they have the same exact criminal history, but one person makes $10,000 a year, where another person makes $1 million a year? And let's say the bail is $10,000. That's 100% of the one person's income, whereas that's a small amount of change for the person that's making $1 million a year. So bail should not be determined in that way. Bail is beyond excessive, and it needs to be determined by a case-by-case basis. And finally, the founding fathers made the U.S. justice system for people to be innocent before proven guilty. But as we've shared today, people sitting in pretrial detention are guilty before proven innocent. They are suffering the effects, the consequences of pretrial detention, and they're not even incarcerated yet. They are not ruled by a judge. They have not attended their trial, and they're already suffering consequences of incarceration. And let's look at Washington, D.C., for example, of how effective it is when a jurisdiction actually abolished pretrial detention for a majority of cases. So D.C. ended cash bail for 94% of their cases. And this has led to an average of a 91% appearance rate to trial and an innocence rate of 86%. So 86% can be explained because, as I talked about earlier, when you are in jail, you're away from your family, you're away from your job, you're not able to make money. It's much harder to communicate with an attorney or public defender or whoever's representing you. And now, if you're bailed out, if you have no pretrial detention, you were able to prepare for your trial. You were able to spend time with your family. You were able to get the resources and means necessary to take on your trial and reach innocence. And furthermore, the 91% appearance rate just shows that this is the 91% appearance rate is comparable to the actual appearance rate for trials when pretrial detention is not abolished. So you're having almost the same exact appearance rate, which shows that people are more inclined to come back to their case. And now that they have the resources and means to do so, and now DC sets it up in a way where they have the ability to. Maybe transportation isn't as much of an issue anymore. Now they're able to send court reminders. They're able to prepare people for court. And now this has led to a much higher innocence rate.
And I want to kind of just circle back a little bit, Shane. So the end goal is abolishing cash bail and pretrial detention. The bail fund and just organizers in general, I think at least the ones that are operating here that I'm a part of, we want to end cash bail and pretrial detention, period. We don't want it, bail to be considered on a case-by-case basis in terms of how much someone is given in bail to correspond, with income. The idea is to abolish cash bail and pretrial detention all the way through, period. So I just kind of wanted to clear that up. The whole movement around prison abolition, the whole movement around ending pretrial detention is to get rid of those policies and practices all the way through, not to reform them to be fair, to the lower income or to the people of color or to, the immigrant community. It's to end it for everyone, period, and to replace it with something that is more people-centered, people-focused. How can we as a community all come together to address harm that's done, by other community members? The argument for transformative and restorative justice, that is thrown out quite a bit in this movement in terms of how we can replace state violence, state harm, the mindset that the police and prisons and cash bail are there to protect people. We really fight against, those perceived notions of that being the safe way to deal with harm that we do to each other. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up and to hopefully make, this presentation make sense. Like all of the numbers, all of the stories, all of the organizing that the bail fund does, Humanities Behind Bars, all of the organizations that I know of, at least in Virginia and the South, that are operating. We're operating to end this stuff, to abolish this stuff, and replace it with something, like I said, that's more people focused, that's community focused. The power needs to be in the community's hands for all of this. The power is in us to correct all of these things that are operating to hurt us. So I just wanted to clear that up a little bit.
Yeah, and just to add, thank you for clarifying that, Deanna. I should have made that more clear. I was more so meaning the court case as just a temporary, and even with the cash bail fund itself, our goal is to not have to run the cash bail fund like that. Our goal is to not have to do that. Our goal is to have permanent legislation, permanent movement, permanent actions that, like Deanna said, abolish pretrial detention as a whole. And right now, like I mentioned, the legislation and the court case and the bail fund, those are temporary measures to combat this right now in a community way. But like Deanna said, the ultimate goal is for none of that to have to happen, and there to be legislation to overarch everything and take out pretrial detention.
So this last slide, that top one is a link to Shane's research paper. If anyone is interested, I highly suggest reading through that. Hopefully, like we've tried to present here, he's done a lot of really important research into cash bail and pretrial detention. And even though, like you said, this was for a project, the passion for it is really there. And you can kind of see in that paper kind of how he navigates kind of this really big issue of pretrial detention and cash bail. But also I wanted to present a couple of other resources that are available for research purposes. A lot of people provide statistics, obviously, and a lot of people do research into all of these different kinds of things. But also they're doing really important work in terms of, the abolition movement, prison abolition, pretrial detention, racial, all of the racial discrimination and discriminatory practices that are happening in all aspects, of just the world in general. The Vera Institute of Justice is where some of the tables and some of the statistics in this presentation has come from. Justice for All as well. They have a Virginia Bail 101 page that lists out kind of how Virginia fits in this widespread cash bail situation. The Virginia Prison Justice Network is based in Richmond. They are, a network of people committed to abolishing prisons and jails. The Prison Policy Initiative is a big research kind of organization that does research into everything prison policy. And then Critical Resistance is, one of the headers of the prison abolition movement based in California. They have a ton of resources on prison abolition, abolition toolkits for people who want to get started in the movement, information on non-reform reform, if anyone's ever heard of that, kind of how we can reform this, that it's not reform to kind of reduce the harm, but reform to completely eliminate it. So I highly recommend kind of reaching out and visiting some of these websites. Some have newsletters that you can subscribe to. They have different reports that you can, download and save and all of that. So like I said, most of the stuff in this presentation came from that and kind of just researching in general. If you can Google prison, industrial complex or prison abolition, it'll pull up quite a few things of just all of the organizations kind of committed to that idea of abolishing prisons and jails and cash bail and pretrial detention.
And all the statistics in this presentation are in that paper at the very end under sources. And just to kind of reiterate everything that's happened in this presentation so far, I know Deanna is going to take this one on too, but just our main purpose of being here today is not to ask for money, it's more so to ask for volunteers, for help, for community building. And our main goal right now is to educate. A lot of people aren't familiar with cash bail. They don't know how cash bail works. They don't know the injustices behind it. And really, my whole high school, my whole legal experiences and past so far, I've just been trying to teach people and educate that there is a complete injustice out there in the justice system, and that there's things we can do about it, and there's actions we can take. And I know Deanna is really good. She's spent a lot of time community building and going into this stuff. So I think she can take it from here. But I really appreciate everyone joining and listening. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat.
Absolutely. So this is the contact information just for the bail fund. I kind of want to point out not to use the bail phone, the 759 number, just because we need to keep minutes up there, to get calls from people in jail. So if anyone is interested in maybe getting connected with the bail fund and helping out, or even with referrals, you're more than welcome to give the numbers, but we also have an email that we are pretty responsive to. There's an online form to fill out, and also our website can pretty much explain, different things that we do in the area and kind of cash bail in general. But for sure, the important point that I hope everyone got from this is the importance of organizing with your community. There's quite a few organizations that are loosely connected. We're trying to build a mutual aid coalition of just a whole bunch of groups in the Hampton Roads area who do different things, just all coming together and sharing resources and making sure, the different people that we talk to or that we want to reach know about, other organizations in the area. So feel free to shoot an email, to the bail fund. If it's anything about Humanities Behind Bars or anything like that, it'll most likely come to me, or about, getting involved with the Mutual Aid Coalition, that will also go to me. So for sure, I would love to talk to anybody kind of offline, or, have a longer conversation just about grassroots organizing in the Hampton Roads area. And I think that's the end of our presentation. Yeah.
So thank you so much. I know we don't have a huge audience today, which is a real shame, because this was really interesting and infuriating, right? In so many ways, to see that our state is so far behind even the national average, but the national average is so, horrible. Yeah. And so, we do have a few, it looks like, faculty and a couple of students on. So if anybody does have any questions, you can either put them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to turn your mics on for you if you would like. That might be easier since there's only 3. I'll just let all of our participants allow. So if anybody has any questions. Maybe I'll ask one first, and maybe that'll get people started. So for either one of you, so if for those of us who were moved by your presentation, what would be the one thing that you would recommend that everybody do, even if they don't have any money to donate? So is there petitions we can sign? Like, what can we do right now?
We're always looking for opportunities to talk to the community. So if you or, a couple of friends or colleagues or anything, are really impassioned by the presentation and want to learn more in terms of kind of like how to get involved by, without feeling the need to donate, we're always happy to figure out different ways to get this information to people. We have a bail brochure, which kind of condenses the presentation into, really a readable kind of thing. We have bail cards. So just spreading the word that the bail fund is here, and what we do and kind of what we want to do in terms of abolishing that in the area. I am unaware of any like actual petitions that are actively going around. That's not to say there aren't any, but I know there's a couple of different counter legislation things that were happening regarding cash bail. And I think we effectively squashed those just with, people showing up and showing out essentially about, how terrible that would be to limit, bail funds, community bail funds and bailing people out. But I would just say if there's any way we can like all have another community conversation, informally, doesn't necessarily have to be at NSU, just any way for us to spread the information.
And just to add, people power is the most important thing with the grassroots and especially the bail fund. We have, like Dana said, multiple coalitions, meetings and stuff and group chats. And there's actively always someone volunteering to help bail someone out, to actually get the money and post it for the person, to provide transportation, provide basic necessities. It's all about helping other people and just, volunteering in any way possible and any way to help others.
Right. If it could be just like donating some snacks. I mean, for me, I would like, if I'm doing a bailout, I would like to have, chips and water and, a piece of fruit. Some people are coming out of there, with medical conditions, diabetes and all of that. So sometimes I really want to have things for people, when they come out, so they're not coming out to nothing.
Good to know. So I know our students have done an amazing job. We have a campus food bank that works really
Awesome.
hard to make sure everybody on campus has the necessities they need that are not necessarily covered by the dining hall. And our dining halls have weird hours, right? So that everybody gets snacks to keep in their room if they need them and can't afford them. So I know that has been something that's been very much on our campus radar. And it's important to hear that, people coming out of prison, right, or coming out of jail may, they may need a granola bar, right? They may need something they could eat because what was provided in the system was not adequate or appropriate for them.
Right.
I know our group is shrinking, but I think I know both the people who are on here. Do either of you have any questions? Well, I really appreciate you both taking the time to talk to us. Oh, there's a chat. No. So Tamika says thank you. She doesn't, but she learned a lot. So I did record this. So as soon as I get it, I will put it on YouTube and send you all the link. So if you would like it for circulating on social media, I know it's always good to have stuff to watch. And we would love for you to come back, hopefully in person next time. And hopefully we'll get a bigger turnout. But I'll certainly keep in touch. And hopefully I'll see you soon at various events around the area.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. At least for me, I'd love to come, in person and really talk to people. I like doing that. So yeah, keep
wonderful.
in touch. Yeah, if there's any opportunities for us to come by and, talk about the bail fund, talk about Humanities Behind Bars, anything like that, I'd love
certainly
to do that.
Our campus has a lot of like community fairs and things where we have, tables and student activism. So I know several students, when I sent this out, either said they had something going on or they had to work during this, but they were interested in finding out more. That's why I recorded it. But I think you may be getting contacts for a student organization on campus, hopefully. So
love it. I'm ready.
All right, great. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.